11-year-old Ben steps into a biker clubhouse, shaking, tears cutting down his face, a backpack clenched to his chest like armor. His voice barely holds as he says,
"Mom left. My brother's still in the house with him."
What's inside that backpack and what waits in that house forces everyone to choose between acting now or trusting a system that might arrive too late. The clubhouse door swung open just after 11, and everyone looked up expecting Rusty with the pizza order. Instead, they got Ben, 11 years old, maybe 12, skinny arms, dirt on his knees, a backpack slung over one shoulder that pulled him slightly sideways with its weight, and tears, not the loud, dramatic kind, but the silent ones that carved clean lines through the grime on his cheeks. Henry set down his beer. The conversation died. Ben's voice came out steady, which somehow made it worse. "Mom left. My brother's still in the house with him." The words were plain. The entire room went cold. Oscar was the first to move, rising from the worn couch near the back. He'd heard that tone before during his years at Child Protective Services, before he walked away from a system that cared more about procedure than people. That flatness in a kid's voice came from exhaustion, the kind that settles in after you've held the weight too long for tears to matter. "Who's him?" Henry asked, his voice low but not unkind. "Darren." Ben wiped his nose with the back of his hand. "Mom's boyfriend." Henry's jaw tightened. He knew that name. Everyone in town knew that name. Darren Cole. A walking powder keg with a smile that charmed bartenders and a temper that sent them scrambling for the phone. Bar fights that somehow never led to charges. Complaints that mysteriously disappeared. A restraining order that expired because the woman who filed it moved 3 counties away. Grant stood up slowly, his medic instincts already kicking in. He didn't move toward Ben. The kid was running on adrenaline, and cornering him would only make things worse. Instead, Grant watched. The way Ben's shoulders sagged. The dark circles under his eyes. The tremor in his hands that had nothing to do with cold. "When did she leave?" Oscar asked gently. Ben's eyes dropped to the floor. "Yesterday morning. She said she'd be back by dinner." Yesterday. A full day and night. "And your brother?" Oscar pressed. "He's 2. Still in his crib." Ben's voice cracked, just slightly. "Darren came home drunk last night. I tried to feed the baby, but Darren told me to stop making noise. So I waited until he passed out. Then I grabbed some stuff and ran." That's when Oscar noticed the backpack. It wasn't a school bag. It was tactical military surplus, too big for a kid, the kind you'd use for camping or bug-out situations. He gestured toward it. "Can I see what you brought?" Ben hesitated, then nodded. Oscar unzipped it carefully. Inside he found diapers folded with the precision of someone who'd done it too many times. A baby bottle with formula still sloshing at the bottom, powder, spare clothes sized for an infant who couldn't pack for himself. And at the bottom, folded into a tight square, a handwritten note on torn notebook paper. The handwriting was hurried, slanted, but deliberate. "I'll be back soon. Be good." No explanation, just a promise that felt more like a prayer. Henry read it over Oscar's shoulder and swore under his breath. He'd seen enough domestic situations to know what this looked like. A mother who packed supplies for her toddler and handed them to her 11-year-old had run out of options. "Did she say where she was going?" Henry asked. Ben shook his head. "She just told me to take care of him, to keep him quiet." Grant finally stepped forward, crouching down so he was eye level with Ben. "You did good, kid. Real good. But we need to know. Is Darren still in the house right now?" "I don't know," Ben admitted. "He left this morning. I don't know if he came back." Grant exchanged a look with Henry. If Darren was gone, that was one problem. If he was there, drunk and volatile with a 2-year-old in the next room, that was another. "All right," Henry said, standing. "We're going to check on your brother. But first, I need you to stay here with Nitro. He's going to get you something to eat, and you're going to tell him everything you remember about the last 2 days. Can you do that?" Ben nodded, too tired to argue. Grant grabbed his jacket and headed for the door, but Oscar stopped him. "We can't just walk in there. If Darren's home and we spook him—" "I know," Grant interrupted. "I'm going to talk to the neighbors first. See what they've seen." 10 minutes later, Grant stood on Mrs. Calder's porch, hands in his pockets, playing the part of a concerned citizen checking on a noise complaint. The old woman answered with her reading glasses still perched on her nose and suspicion written across her face. "I haven't called about any noise," she said sharply. "I know, ma'am," Grant said gently, "but we've had reports of disturbances on this street, and I wanted to make sure everything's all right." Mrs. Calder's expression softened slightly. She glanced toward the house next door, Ben's house. "The baby's been crying," she admitted quietly, "for hours. On and off since yesterday." Grant's stomach dropped. "Have you seen anyone go in or out?" She shook her head. "Darren left this morning in his truck. Haven't seen him since. And the mother." She trailed off, wringing her hands. "I haven't seen her in 2 days. Why didn't you call someone?" Mrs. Calder looked down. "Last year, my dog got loose and wandered into their yard. Darren came out screaming. Said if it happened again, he'd make sure I never saw the dog again." Her voice wavered. "I'm 73 years old. I live alone. I didn't know what to do." Grant placed a hand on her shoulder. "You just did it. Thank you." He walked back to his bike and pulled out his phone. The text to Henry was short. "Baby's inside. Alone. Crying for hours. We move now." Henry divided the crew with the precision of someone who'd done extractions before, just never on American soil. Oscar and Grant would go through the side door. Henry and Tomas would cover the back. No bikes. No leather. Nothing that screamed biker gang to anyone watching through their blinds. They parked 2 streets over and walked in like neighbors. The house looked ordinary enough from the outside. A rental with peeling paint and a lawn that had given up sometime in July. But Grant knew better than to trust appearances. He'd seen horrors hidden behind welcome mats and flower boxes. The side door was unlocked, open like someone had walked out and forgotten to care. Inside, the smell hit first. Sour milk mixed with stale beer and something darker underneath. The scent of a place where care had stopped mattering. The living room was a disaster. Empty bottles crowded the coffee table. Some tipped over, most forgotten. An ashtray overflowed onto the carpet. A chair lay on its side, one leg splintered. And in the corner, a baby monitor blinked red, its battery long dead. Grant moved toward the hallway, Oscar close behind. The crying had stopped. In situations like this, silence meant either sleep or something worse. The nursery door was cracked open. Grant pushed it gently with 2 fingers. The toddler was in the crib, lying on his back, staring at the ceiling with glassy, unfocused eyes. His face was flushed red, his lips dry and cracked. The crib sheet was soaked, urine probably hours old. A stuffed rabbit lay just out of reach, knocked through the bars onto the floor. Grant's training took over. He moved smoothly, lifting the baby with care, checking for breathing, for responsiveness. The child whimpered but didn't cry. Too dehydrated, too exhausted. Grant cradled him against his chest, feeling the rapid heartbeat, the shallow breathing. "Oscar," he said quietly. "Water. Clean cloth. Now." Oscar was already moving, heading to the kitchen, stepping over debris. He found a relatively clean glass, filled it with tap water, soaked a dishcloth. When he returned, Grant was murmuring to the baby, soft reassurances in a voice that had once talked Marines through shock and pain in the sand. Grant pressed the damp cloth to the baby's lips, letting tiny drops seep into his mouth. The toddler's tongue moved reflexively, seeking more. Good sign. Swallow reflex intact. Henry appeared in the doorway, his expression carved from stone. "We need to go. Now." 2 more minutes, Grant said without looking up. "He's dehydrated. If we move him too fast." Darren's truck just turned onto the street. The timeline collapsed. Oscar grabbed the diaper bag hanging off the changing table, shoving in whatever clean supplies he could find. Grant wrapped the baby in a blanket and stood, still hydrating him in careful increments. They moved through the house quickly but deliberately. Running meant mistakes. They were halfway across the front lawn when Darren's pickup lurched into the driveway. He stumbled out, reeking of whiskey even from 15 feet away, eyes bloodshot and wild. When he saw the baby in Grant's arms, fury twisted his face. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Darren's words slurred together, but the threat underneath was crystal clear. Henry stepped forward, positioning himself between Darren and Grant. "We got a call about a child in distress." We responded. "You got a call?" Darren laughed, ugly and sharp. "You're not cops. You're criminals playing dress-up." He jabbed a finger toward Grant. "That's kidnapping. I know my rights. I'll have every one of you arrested." Tomas moved to Henry's left, silent but present. Darren noticed and his bravado flickered, just for a second. "The baby was alone," Oscar said evenly. "No food, no water. You want to talk about rights? Let's talk about neglect." "His mother left," Darren shot back. "Not me. I just got home. How was I supposed to know she'd run off?" "You were here last night," Henry said. "Ben told us." Darren's eyes narrowed. "Ben's a liar. Kid makes up stories for attention." He took a step forward. "Now give me my son before I call the real police." "Go ahead," Henry said quietly. "Call them." For a moment it looked like Darren might actually swing. His fists clenched, his shoulders coiled. Grant shifted the baby slightly, ready to turn his body into a shield if needed. Then the sirens cut through the tension. Deputy Sheriff Alton's cruiser rolled up slowly, lights flashing but no siren now. He stepped out, one hand resting casually on his belt, his expression unreadable. Alton had history with the club, good history. He'd grown up 2 streets over from Henry, and he knew the difference between men who caused trouble and men who stopped it. "Gentlemen," Alton said calmly, "someone want to tell me what's going on?" Darren lurched forward. "They broke into my house. They kidnapped my kid." Alton looked at Grant, at the baby in his arms, at the condition of the house visible through the still open door. He'd worn the badge long enough to know what mattered. "Door was unlocked," Grant said. "Baby was unattended, dehydrated, in a soiled crib. We stabilized him." Alton walked past Darren without acknowledging him, stepping into the house. He was inside for less than 30 seconds. When he emerged, his expression had hardened. "Mr. Cole," Alton said formally, "you're intoxicated in public, and I'm seeing evidence of child endangerment. I'm going to need you to turn around and place your hands behind your back." "You've got to be kidding me," Darren shouted. "They're the ones." "Now, Mr. Cole." It took 2 more deputies to get the cuffs on. Darren screamed threats the entire way to the cruiser, promising lawyers and lawsuits and consequences. But as the cruiser pulled away, Henry didn't feel relief. Because 3 hours later, when the CPS caseworker finally arrived, clipboard in hand, exhaustion in her eyes, she looked at the evidence, looked at the baby, looked at Darren's record, and said the words Oscar had been dreading. "There's no immediate danger now that Mr. Cole is in custody. We'll locate the mother and assess the home environment. The children will likely be returned to her care pending evaluation." Oscar's hands curled into fists. "You're not hearing me. This wasn't a one-time thing. This is a pattern." The caseworker's smile was tired and practiced. "I understand your concern, but we have procedures." And just like that, Oscar remembered exactly why he'd left. Oscar didn't sleep that night. Neither did Henry. By sunrise, they were sitting at the clubhouse bar with cold coffee, knowing muscle wouldn't fix this. "We can't threaten them," Henry said, staring at his mug. "That plays right into Darren's hands. Makes us look like the danger." "So what do we do?" Oscar asked. "Wait for the system to fail these kids again?" Henry was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone. "We build a case they can't ignore." The diner on 5th Avenue had cracked vinyl booths and fluorescent lights that buzzed more than they illuminated. The coffee tasted like yesterday, but the back room held 20 people when it mattered. Henry started making calls. Not to lawyers or politicians, but to ordinary people. The bartender at Rosie's Tavern. A woman named Michelle who'd moved to the next county 2 years ago. A man called Eric who still crossed the street when he saw a certain kind of pickup truck. The meeting was set for 7 p.m. Henry didn't tell CPS it was happening. He invited them. The caseworker, her name was Jennifer Moss, arrived looking suspicious and tired. She took a seat at the head of the table, briefcase at her feet, clearly expecting some kind of ambush. "Thank you for coming," Henry said simply. They came in quietly. Ray, the bartender, came in wearing his work shirt, smelling faintly of lime and beer. Michelle wore sunglasses even though the sun had set an hour ago, and she kept them on when she sat down. Eric limped slightly, an old injury that had healed wrong. Jennifer's pen touched paper but didn't move. What exactly is this? Testimony, Oscar said. The kind that doesn't make it into background checks. Ray went first. He spoke about the night Darren smashed a pint glass into the bar because someone looked at him wrong. How he'd grabbed Ray by the collar and threatened to finish what he started before his friends pulled him away. No police report. Ray was undocumented. Couldn't risk the attention. Michelle took off her sunglasses. The scar above her left eyebrow was faint but visible. She talked about 6 months of dating Darren, how charming he'd been at first, how quickly that changed. The night he shoved her into a wall because dinner was late. The morning he twisted her wrist until it fractured because she'd mentioned leaving. She filed a restraining order, then fled the state when it expired because renewing it meant staying within his reach. Eric's story was quieter, which made it cut deeper. He'd been Darren's neighbor 3 years ago. Filed a noise complaint after weeks of shouting matches and thrown furniture. 2 days later, his mailbox was smashed. A week after that, his tires were slashed. The police said they couldn't prove anything. Eric said he couldn't afford to keep replacing tires, so he moved. Jennifer wrote everything down, her expression carefully blank. Then Ben walked in. He'd been sitting with Nitro in the front of the diner, eating fries and trying to pretend this wasn't about him. But Oscar had asked if he'd be willing to talk, and Ben had said yes. Not because he wasn't scared, but because he was tired of being scared alone. He sat down across from Jennifer, small and serious. "Do you want to tell me what happened?" Jennifer asked gently, her professionalism softening slightly. Ben took a breath. "Mom didn't leave because she wanted to. No one moved. Darren told her if she went to the police, they'd take us away, that we'd end up in foster care, split up, and it would be her fault." His voice was steady, but his hands gripped the edge of the table. "He made me watch the baby. Said if I let him cry, if I bothered Darren while he was sleeping, there'd be consequences. Mom couldn't take it anymore, but she couldn't take us with her either. So she left me the backpack and told me to keep him safe until she could figure something out." Jennifer set down her pen. "Did your mother tell you this?" "She didn't have to," Ben said. "I heard them fighting. I heard what he said. And I saw her face when she left. She wasn't running away from us. She was running for help." Henry leaned forward. "Darren's been using the system as a weapon. He knows how it works. He knows that without documented evidence, without police reports, he's untouchable. And he knows that threatening to take the kids away is more effective than any physical violence." Jennifer looked down at her notes. Pages of them now, patterns written in different handwriting, different voices, same story. She closed the notebook slowly. "This doesn't change procedure," she said carefully. "But it does change context." She looked at Ben. "If we can locate your mother and verify what you've said, it shifts everything. Do you know where she might have gone?" Ben shook his head. "But she has a sister. In Pittsburgh. Aunt Jenna. She hasn't talked to her in years. But that's enough," Jennifer said, writing quickly. She stood, gathering her materials. "I'll make some calls tonight, and I'll be recommending that the children not be returned to any environment where Darren Cole has access, pending a full investigation." It wasn't victory, but the ground had shifted. As Jennifer left, Oscar exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. Ray clapped him on the shoulder. "Think it'll stick?" "It has to," Oscar said quietly, because 2 hours later Jennifer called back. She'd found the mother. She was in Pittsburgh, exactly where Ben thought she'd be, staying with her sister and waiting for someone, anyone, to believe her. The story Ben had carried alone finally had witnesses. The safe house didn't look like much from the outside. A modest 2-story on a quiet street with bars on the windows disguised as decorative ironwork. But inside, the air lighter, like a held breath finally released. Ben's mother, Leah, sat on the couch with her youngest son in her lap, watching him play with a plastic truck like he'd never seen one before. She'd cried on and off for 3 days. Not from sadness, from relief she hadn't let herself feel until now. Darren had been formally charged. Not just public intoxication this time, child endangerment, criminal threatening, violation of a previous restraining order that Michelle's testimony had brought back to light. The prosecutor was building a case that would actually stick, and Darren's bail had been set high enough that his friends couldn't scrape it together. Leah hadn't stopped thanking people. The bikers, the caseworker, even the deputy who documented the scene. But the person she hadn't met yet was Melissa. Melissa had been prepared for a different ending to this story. When she'd heard about 2 boys in danger, possibly heading into the foster system, something inside her had clicked into place. She was 43, single by choice, financially stable, and had been thinking about adoption for years without committing. This felt like the answer she'd been waiting for. She'd cleared out her guest room in 2 days, bought bunk beds, painted one wall blue, filled a shelf with books for different reading levels. She'd contacted a family lawyer, started the paperwork, imagined what it would be like to pack school lunches and attend parent-teacher conferences. She'd prepared herself to become a mother. When Jennifer called to tell her the boys would be reunited with their biological mother instead, Melissa had said all the right things. She was happy for them, relieved. This was the best possible outcome. She'd said all the right things. Then she sat in that empty blue room and cried for an hour. But Melissa wasn't the type to stay down for long. She'd gone to Henry the next day with a simple question, "Can I meet her?" Which was how she ended up at the safe house on a Wednesday afternoon, holding a bag of groceries and wondering if this was a terrible idea. Leah answered the door with the baby on her hip, wariness in her eyes that Melissa recognized immediately, the look of someone who'd learned not to trust kindness without questioning it first. "You're Melissa," Leah said. "I am." Melissa held up the bag awkwardly. "I brought some things. Formula. Diapers. I wasn't sure what you needed." Leah's expression softened slightly. "You're the one who was going to adopt them." It wasn't a question. Melissa nodded. For a long moment they just stood there. 2 women on opposite sides of a door, both shaped by circumstances neither had fully controlled. Then Leah stepped aside. "Come in." They sat in the small kitchen while Ben played with his brother in the living room, building towers out of blocks and knocking them down with sound effects that made the toddler squeal with delight. "I want you to know I wasn't trying to take them from you," Melissa said quietly. I know what you thought," Leah interrupted gently. "Everyone did. I don't blame you." She wrapped her hands around her coffee mug, staring into it. "I didn't know what else to do. Leaving felt like the worst thing I could do as a mother, but staying was worse. At least if I left, there was a chance someone would notice. Someone would help." "That took courage," Melissa said. Leah laughed bitterly. "It took desperation." They talked for over an hour. Leah explained how she'd met Darren during a vulnerable time, how the red flags had appeared slowly and then all at once, how leaving seemed impossible when you had 2 kids and no savings and a man who knew exactly which threats would keep you frozen. Melissa listened without offering the solutions Leah had already exhausted. Then Melissa said something Leah wasn't expecting. "I still have that room ready. The blue one. And I know you're staying here temporarily, but when you're ready to find something more permanent, if you wanted to stay nearby, there's a rental house 2 blocks from the clubhouse. Small, but it has a yard. The owner owes Henry a favor." Leah's eyes snapped up. "Why would you help me?" "Because I wanted to be there for your kids," Melissa said simply. "And I realized that doesn't have to mean replacing you. It can mean standing beside you." Leah's eyes filled. "I can't pay much. Not yet. The rent's already covered for 6 months, Melissa said. "Henry and the club took care of it. Consider it a loan if that makes it easier. Pay it back when you're stable." Leah covered her mouth, tears spilling over. 3 weeks later, Leah moved into the house on Elm Street with both boys, a donated couch, and a job lined up at the local grocery store. The biker clubhouse was visible from her front porch, close enough that she never felt alone, far enough that she could breathe. Melissa came by twice a week at first, ostensibly to drop off supplies or check if Leah needed anything. But really, they both knew it was because they'd started to become friends. The boys started calling her Aunt Melissa without anyone suggesting it, and Melissa found herself at birthday parties and doctor's appointments, filling a role she'd never quite imagined but that fit better than she'd expected. For months later, Melissa adopted Maya, a 7-year-old who'd spent too long waiting for someone. Maya and Ben became inseparable within days, trading books and building forts in Melissa's backyard. Leah watched them play one afternoon, sitting on Melissa's porch with coffee, and said quietly, "Thank you for not giving up on them. Thank you for fighting for them," Melissa replied. Ben's backpack, the one he'd carried into the clubhouse that night, packed with diapers and hope and fear, sat in the hall closet now empty. Leah had asked if he wanted to throw it out, but Ben said no. He wanted to keep it, just in case someone else ever needed it. But the weight he'd carried that night, the responsibility of keeping his brother alive while the adults failed them, that weight was finally gone. In its place was a family no one had planned, but everyone had chosen. The baby slept through the night now. Ben smiled more. Leah stopped flinching at loud noises. And when Darren was sentenced to 4 years, with mandatory counseling and a permanent restraining order upon release, nobody celebrated. They just breathed easier, because rescue, they'd learned, wasn't a single moment. It was every day after, choosing to build something better than what came before. Ben's backpack held more than supplies. It held hope, fear, and a mother's desperate gamble to protect her children. What would you have done if Ben walked into your life? Comment below. And if this story moved you, give it a like, share, and subscribe to embrace the journey for more stories that remind us why we fight for each other. See you in our next video.